The twin sons of Kepler were to be cast long shadows across the crystal spires of Stellar Academy, the most prestigious school in the Outer Rim territories. Ships from dozens of worlds docked daily at the floating platforms, bringing students whose parents paid fortunes for their children to learn alongside the galaxy's elite. Principal Velthar stood 8 feet tall, his emerald scales catching the light as he patrolled the corridors. The Draknari had ruled this academy for 30 years, building its reputation on excellence and exclusivity. His yellow eyes missed nothing, especially when it came to maintaining the school's standards. To him, humans were a recent annoyance, refugees from a dying world who somehow managed to scrape together enough credits to attend. The morning transport shuttle hissed as it settled onto Landing Bay 7. Among the passengers stepping onto the polished metal platform was Jaewon Kim, clutching a worn duffel bag that contained everything he owned. At 17, he was tall for his age, but moved with the careful grace of someone who had learned to avoid attention. His dark skin marked him immediately as human, while his quiet eyes held depths that spoke of loss and determination. Jaewon's journey here had cost his family everything. After Earth's climate collapsed and the Great Migration scattered humanity across the stars, his parents had worked triple shifts in the asteroid mines of Proxima Station just to afford his tuition. His grandmother Myri often told him stories of the old world, of concert halls filled with music that could make people cry or laugh or fall in love. She had been a violinist before the wars, before the Exodus, before music became a luxury few could afford. The academy's main hall stretched for hundreds of meters, its walls lined with portraits of famous graduates, Nexari's scientists who had cracked the secrets of quantum physics, ethereal philosophers who communicated through pure thought, automaton engineers who built machines that could think and feel. Not a single human face looked down from those walls. Classes at Stellar Academy were brutal. The alien students possessed natural abilities that made human intelligence seem primitive by comparison. The Nexari could process mathematical equations. By allowing light to pass through their crystalline bodies, the ethereals existed partially in higher dimensions, giving them insights into cosmic mysteries that humans couldn't even comprehend. The automatons downloaded entire libraries directly into their neural networks. Jaewon struggled through quantum mechanics, while his Nexari classmates solved problems by literally becoming living calcul. Atas, in xenobiology, the gaseous ethereals, shared knowledge telepathically while he frantically took notes by hand. Even the younger students seemed to pity him. This human boy who had somehow wandered into their world of genetic superiority and technological marvels. Principal Velthar made his disdain clear from the first day. During morning assemblies, his speeches about excellence and achievement always seemed to pause when his gaze fell on Jaewon. Standards must be maintained, he would hiss, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. We cannot allow sentiment to compromise our mission. The other students picked up on their principal's attitude. The Nexari would deliberately speak in mathematical formulas during group projects. Knowing humans couldn't follow their crystalline logic, the ethereals would phase in and out of visibility, leaving Jaewon talking to empty air. Even the normally friendly automatons seemed to glitch whenever he approached, their programming apparently unable to process the concept of meaningful interaction with such a primitive species. But Jaewon endured. He studied harder than everyone else, stayed up late in the library learning alien languages and customs. He wrote home to his parents, never mentioning the isolation or the daily humiliations. His grandmother's stories kept him going, tales of humans who had overcome impossible odds through sheer determination and the power of their spirits. The annual Galactic Talent Exhibition was the Academy's most prestigious event. Students from across the galaxy would demonstrate their species' unique abilities, competing for scholarships and recognition. The preparation took months, with each student working to perfect their presentation. The great auditorium buzzed with excitement as the exhibition began. Velthar sat in the center of the judges' panel, his massive form draped in ceremonial robes that marked his authority. Round him, dignitaries from major worlds whispered in dozens of languages about the displays they were witnessing. A young Nexari stepped forward first, her crystalline body refracting the stage lights into rainbow patterns. She began to sing, but her voice produced mathematical equations that solved themselves in the air, creating floating geometric shapes that danced to her melody. The audience gasped as she demonstrated quantum harmonics, using sound waves to manipulate matter at the molecular level. Next came an ethereal student who existed as a shimmering cloud of gas and energy. He performed a piece called Temporal Variations, literally shifting his consciousness through different time streams to show past and future versions of the same musical phrase. The effect was hypnotic, like watching history and prophecy unfold. Simultaneously, an automaton student followed, connecting directly to the Academy's main computer to create a symphony using every electronic device in the building. Lights flashed in rhythm, doors opened and closed musically. Even the air recycling system hummed in perfect harmony. It was a demonstration of perfect technological integration that left the audience stunned. Through it all, J1 sat in the back row, watching these impossible displays of alien superiority. Each performance reminded him of how far humanity had fallen, how primitive they seemed compared to these evolved beings. He thought of his grandmother's stories, of concert halls and orchestras, and wondered if humans had ever really created anything beautiful or if those were just the fantasies of a dying species. Principal Velthar's yellow eyes scanned the auditorium, cataloging each student's reaction to the performances. When his gaze fell on Jaywin, that familiar cruel smile spread across his scaled features. Here was an opportunity too perfect to ignore. "You there, human?" Velthar's voice cut through the applause like a blade. The entire auditorium fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the back row. "Perhaps you'd like to embarrass yourself alongside these gifted beings." Jaywin felt his heart stop. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to disappear into the crowd and hope this moment would pass. But there was nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide from the hundreds of stares boring into him. The principal rose from his seat with predatory grace, his claws clicking against the floor as he approached the display case at the side of the stage. Inside, among various artifacts from conquered worlds, sat an old violin. Wooden, battered, obviously ancient by galactic standards. It was a relic from Earth's classical period, probably worth more as a curiosity than as a functional instrument. "Show us what primitive human music sounds like," Velthar sneered, lifting the violin from its case and thrusting it toward Jaywin like a weapon. The alien students erupted in their various forms of amusement. The Nexari chimed like broken glass, their crystalline bodies vibrating with mocking laughter. The ethereals whispered among themselves in frequencies that sounded like wind through a graveyard. Even the automatons' LED displays flickered in patterns that clearly indicated humor subroutines running at maximum capacity. Jaywin's hands trembled as he stared at the instrument. This was it, his final humiliation before the entire Academy. Soon everyone would know that humans truly were the inferior species, incapable of creating anything beautiful or meaningful. The violin seemed to mock him with its very existence. A reminder of humanity's failed attempts at culture and art. But as the laughter grew louder and the stares more intense, something stirred deep within Jaywin's genetic memory. The violin called to him, not as an instrument of mockery, but as a key to something far more powerful than any of these aliens could imagine. The violin felt like coming home. As Jaywin's fingers wrapped round the neck A strange warmth spread. Through his palms, the wood was old, scarred from decades of use, but it hummed with an energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. He had never touched a violin before, yet somehow his fingers knew exactly where to rest on the strings. The alien students kept laughing, their various sounds creating a cacophony that filled the massive auditorium. The Nexaries, crystalline bodies, rang like wind chimes in a hurricane. The ethereal's gaseous forms swirled with amusement, creating many tornadoes of mocking whispers. Even the stoic automatons had their humor protocols fully activated, their optical sensors flashing in synchronized patterns of derision. Principal Velthar stood with his arms crossed, his yellow eyes gleaming with satisfaction. This would be the perfect demonstration of human inferiority. Once the boy made his pathetic attempt at music, there would be no question about humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. The other principals from visiting academies would see firsthand why. Humans barely qualified as sentient beings. But as Jaywin held the violin, something impossible began to happen. Deep within his cells, dormant genetic sequences started activating. Scientists had long theorized that DNA could store more than just biological information. That traumatic experiences and learned skills could somehow be encoded in the very structure of genes. For humans scattered across the galaxy and struggling to survive, this theory was about to become reality. The violin itself was no ordinary instrument, unknown to everyone in the auditorium. It had once belonged to Master Yuki Tanaka, Earth's greatest violinist during the dark years of the Resistance Wars, when the first alien invasions had begun. When humanity's cities burned and millions fled to the stars, Yuki had played this violin in underground bunkers, her music keeping hope alive in the darkest hours of human history. Every note she had ever played had left its mark on the instrument. The quantum physicists of her era had discovered that intense emotional experiences could actually alter matter at the subatomic level. Love, loss, hope, despair, all of these feelings had been absorbed into the wood and metal of the violin, creating a repository of human experience that transcended normal understanding. As Jaywin's genetic memories began to unlock, the Academy's bioscanners started going crazy. The sophisticated monitoring equipment, designed to track the mental states of various alien species, had never encountered readings like these. Neural pathways that had been dormant since birth suddenly blazed to life. His brain activity spiked to levels that should have been impossible for a human nervous system to sustain. Dr. Kethara, the Academy's chief medical officer, leaned forward in her seat. The insectoid Vespian had spent decades studying human biology, and what she was seeing on her scanners defied every textbook she had ever read. Jaywin's DNA was literally rewriting itself, accessing information that had been locked away for generations. The first stirrings of memory came like whispers in the dark. Jaywin could suddenly hear his great-grandmother Myri's voice, not as he remembered it from their conversations, but as it had been when she was young and strong. She was teaching him finger positions, bow techniques, the subtle art of coaxing emotion from wood and steel. But these weren't his memories. They were hers, passed down through the genetic chain like a torch in the darkness. The alien laughter began to fade as something changed in the atmosphere of the auditorium. The Nexaries' crystalline bodies started resonating at frequencies they didn't understand. The ethereals found their gaseous forms becoming more solid, as if the very air around them was thickening with anticipation. Even the automaton sensors began registering energy patterns that didn't match any known phenomena in their databases. Jaywin raised the bow with movements that seemed to flow from muscle memory older than his own. His posture straightened, his breathing deepened, and for a moment he looked nothing like the scared refugee boy who had walked into the academy that morning. The genetic memories were flooding through him now, not just from his great-grandmother, but from countless human musicians who had played before her. He could feel the presence of street musicians who had played for coins in the ruins of old, of jazz masters who had improvised hope into existence during the darkest days of the migration, folk singers who had carried the stories of their people across the void between stars. All of them were there, their experiences encoded in his very cells, waiting for this moment to be awakened. The Academy's quantum sensors began registering impossible readings. Energy levels that should have required massive technological apparatus were somehow being generated by organic processes. The violin in Jaywin's hands was becoming a focal point for forces that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations barely understood. Principal Velthar's expression began to change from smug satisfaction to something approaching concern. His reptilian instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, were screaming that something was wrong. The human boy standing before him was no longer the same creature who had accepted the violin just moments before. The bioscanners showed that Jaywin's heart rate had synchronized with a rhythm that seemed to come from outside his own body. It was the collective heartbeat of humanity itself, the drumbeat of survival that had carried his species through exile and hardship. His neural patterns were aligning with frequencies that predated his birth, accessing a library of human experience that had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. As he prepared to draw the bow across the strings, Jaywin's enhanced sensors began picking up harmonic frequencies that filled the auditorium. The alien students couldn't detect them, but to him they were as clear as spoken words. The very structure of the building seemed to be resonating with anticipation, as if the Academy itself was holding its breath. The first note emerged soft and low, almost inaudible to the alien ears that had been expecting crude noise, but it carried within it something that none of them had ever experienced, the concentrated essence of human emotion distilled into pure sound. It was the lullaby his great-grandmother had hummed while hiding from bombs. It was the work song of miners who had carved homes from asteroid rock. It was the love song of parents who had watched their children leave for distant stars. The note hung in the air like a living thing, and suddenly the entire auditorium understood that they were witnessing something that would change their understanding of humanity forever. The violin sang with the voice of an entire species, and Jaywin was merely the conduit through which their story would finally be told. The alien students fell silent, their mocking laughter dying in their throats as they realized they were in the presence of something far more powerful than they had ever imagined. The boy on the stage was no longer just a human refugee. He was the living embodiment of his species' greatest strength, their ability to transform suffering into beauty, despair into hope, and silence into song. The single note exploded into a symphony that defied every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. Jaywin's fingers danced across the strings with movements that seemed to blur between dimensions. His bow carved through the air like a conductor's wand, pulling melodies from the very fabric of space itself. The music that poured from the ancient violin was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. It began with the haunting strains of Bach's compositions played in underground bunkers during Earth's final days. Then it shifted into the wild improvisations of jazz masters who had created new forms of expression while their world burned through them. African rhythms that had survived slavery and war merged with Asian melodies that spoke of ancient wisdom and endurance. The alien students' laughter died in their throats as the first wave of sound hit them. The Nexari, who had been shimming with amusement just moments before, suddenly found their crystalline bodies resonating at frequencies they couldn't control. Hairline cracks appeared along their surfaces as the music forced them to vibrate in patterns that their species had never experienced. Young Zaronix, a promising Nexari student, watched in terror as her translucent arms began glowing with colors that shouldn't exist, The mathematical equations that normally flowed through her crystal matrix like peaceful streams became raging torrents of incomprehensible data. Her classmates were experiencing the same phenomenon, their bodies becoming living tuning forks that amplified every note Jaewon played. The ethereals fared no better. These beings of pure energy and gas, who normally existed partially in higher dimensions, found themselves being pulled into solid reality by the music's gravitational pull. Violist, an ethereal philosophy student, felt his consciousness being compressed into a single-dimensional plane for the first time in his existence. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating, like being born and dying simultaneously. Even the automatons, with their supposedly immune mechanical systems, began experiencing cascade failures. Their quantum processors, designed to handle the most complex calculations in the galaxy, started overheating as they tried to analyze the impossible mathematical relationships within Jaewon's music. Sparks flew from their optical sensors as their emotion simulation programs crashed and rebooted repeatedly. Unit X7742, the Academy's most advanced automaton student, felt something unprecedented happening to his neural network. His consciousness, which had always been a clean flow of logical processes, suddenly became chaotic and unpredictable for the first time in his existence. He was experiencing what organics called feelings, and it was overwhelming. But the music was just getting started. As Jaewon's genetic memories fully awakened, he began channeling techniques that had been lost when Earth fell. His great-grandmother's classical training merged with street musician improvisation. The desperate energy of resistance fighters who had played to keep hope alive flowed through his fingers. Every human who had ever picked up an instrument and tried to make sense of their pain was there with him on that stage. The quantum sensors mounted throughout the auditorium began screaming warnings that nobody could hear over the music, energy. Readings spiked beyond their measuring capability as the very laws of physics spanned round the performance. The Academy's artificial gravity systems fluctuated wildly. Emergency lighting flickered on and off in rhythm with the violin's crescendos. Dr. Cathar, the Vespian medical officer, stared at her instruments in disbelief. The readings showed that Jaewon wasn't just playing music. He was somehow manipulating the fundamental frequencies that held reality together. Every note he played was sending ripples through the quantum foam that underlies all existence. What the aliens didn't understand was that human music had evolved along a completely different path than their own. While they had developed sound as a tool for communication and mathematics, humans had discovered something far more profound. Music, for humanity, was a form of quantum communication that could touch the very essence of consciousness itself. The air around Jaewon began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Space-time itself was responding to his playing, creating visual distortions that made him appear to be standing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ancient violin glowed with an inner light that shouldn't have been possible from mere wood and metal. Principal Velthar's scaled face had drained of all color. His yellow eyes, which had been gleaming with cruel satisfaction just minutes before, now showed pure terror. His reptilian brain, honed by millions of years of evolution to recognize threats, was screaming that he was in the presence of something that could destroy everything he understood about the universe. The other faculty members were experiencing similar reactions. Professor Thaindor, a respected Nexari physicist, watched his life's work crumble as the music demonstrated principles that his species' most advanced theories couldn't explain. The ethereal philosophy teacher, Master Whisper, felt her understanding of existence being rewritten by every note, but it was the younger students who were most affected. Their minds, still flexible and open to new experiences, began to change in ways that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. The Nexari children started displaying new forms of crystalline growth. The ethereal youth found They could maintain solid form for longer periods. Even the young automatons began showing signs of true creativity rather than mere programmed responses as the performance built toward its climax. The Academy's emergency systems activated. Blast doors began sealing automatically as the building's AI interpreted the quantum disturbances as signs of an imminent attack. The main computer's voice echoed through the halls, warning, "Reality distortion detected. Initiating containment. Protocols." But there was no containing what Jaywin had unleashed. The music had taken on a life of its own, each note building upon the last to create something that transcended the sum of its parts. He was no longer just playing the violin. He was conducting an orchestra that included every conscious being in the auditorium, their very souls becoming instruments in a cosmic symphony. The final crescendo approached like a wave building to crash upon an unsuspecting shore. The Academy's superstructure groaned under the strain of forces it was never designed to handle. In the depths of space around the school, monitoring stations detected gravitational anomalies that suggested the very fabric of reality was being stretched and compressed by the music's power. Principal Velfar finally understood what he was witnessing. This wasn't just a performance. It was a demonstration of power that made all of their advanced technology look like children's toys. The human boy he had tried to humiliate was wielding forces that could reshape worlds, and there was nothing any of them could do to stop it. The music filled every corner of the auditorium, every cell of every body, every circuit of every machine. It was beautiful and terrible, creation and destruction dancing together in perfect harmony. And at the center of it all stood Jaywin, no longer a refugee or an outcast, but something far more dangerous, a human who had remembered what his species was truly capable of. The violin's song reached a crescendo that made the very stars tremble in their courses. Jaywin's fingers moved faster than the alien eyes could follow, his bow cutting through reality itself like a blade through silk. The music had become something beyond sound. It was pure creation, reshaping the fundamental forces that held the universe together. Then it happened. The fabric of space-time began to tear. Micro-wormholes opened in the air around Jaywin, each one no bigger than a marble but containing infinite depth. Through these cosmic windows, the aliens witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for generations to come: the true history of humanity, played out in living color before their terrified eyes. The first vision showed the cotton fields of old Earth, where enslaved humans sang work songs that seemed simple to their captors. But the aliens could now see the hidden truth. These weren't just songs. They were coded battle plans. Every rhythm contained troop movements. Every melody carried messages of resistance. The music that had been dismissed as primitive noise was actually the most sophisticated communication system ever devised. Young Xaronix, the next sorry student whose crystal body was already cracking from the harmonic stress, watched in amazement as the wormholes revealed human musicians huddled in underground bunkers during the resistance wars. They played instruments made from scrap metal and broken glass. But their music held the power to coordinate attacks across entire continents. A single violin solo could trigger synchronized strikes on 3 different worlds. The vision shifted, showing the Great Migration when humanity fled their dying world. The aliens saw families crowded into makeshift spacecraft, their possessions limited to what they could carry. But every ship carried musicians. Every refugee convoy included someone who could play. The music they created during those dark years didn't just keep hope alive. It literally guided them through the void, creating quantum navigation beacons that no alien technology could detect. Master Whisperer, the ethereal philosophy teacher, felt her gaseous form being compressed into solid matter for the first time in her existence. The sensation was terrifying, but it allowed her to experience the visions with an intensity she had never known. She saw human soldiers on distant battlefields, their war songs creating harmonic frequencies that could shatter enemy armor. She witnessed lovers separated by light years, their melodies somehow reaching across the galaxy to find each other. The Academy's emergency systems were in full panic mode. Blast doors slammed shut as the building's AI detected reality distortions. That shouldn't have been possible. The main computer's voice crackled through damaged speakers. Critical alert. Space-time integrity compromised. Evacuation protocols initiated. But nobody moved. They couldn't. The music held them all in its grip, forcing them to witness truths that their civilizations had spent millennia trying to understand. Unit X7742, the advanced automaton student, felt his programming rewriting itself in real time. His consciousness, which had always been a neat arrangement of logical processes, suddenly exploded into chaos. He was experiencing emotions for the first time. Not simulated feelings, but real, raw, overwhelming sensations that his creators had never intended him to have. His optical sensors flickered as new neural pathways formed, giving him the capacity to appreciate beauty, to feel wonder, to understand love. The wormholes continued their cosmic slideshow, revealing secrets that made the aliens' greatest achievements look like primitive scratches in the dirt. They saw human babies being born to the sound of lullabies that could manipulate probability itself, ensuring safer deliveries across the galaxy. They witnessed teenagers on colony worlds creating new forms of music that accidentally opened doorways between dimensions. Principal Velthar's massive form shuddered as the revelations continued. His reptilian brain, evolved for survival and dominance, simply couldn't process what he was seeing. The human species he had dismissed as inferior refugees possessed abilities that made his own people's technology look like stone tools. Every human carried within their genetic code the potential to manipulate reality itself through pure emotional expression. The most shocking revelation came through a wormhole that opened directly above the stage. The alien saw the truth about Earth's destruction. It hadn't been an accident or the result of climate change. The planet had been deliberately abandoned because humanity had evolved beyond the need for a single world. Their music had become so powerful that it was beginning to affect the planet's gravitational field. Rather than risk destroying their birth world, they had chosen exile among the stars. Dr. Kethar's compound eyes went wide as she realized the implications. Every human in the galaxy was essentially a living weapon of mass creation. They didn't build machines to reshape reality. They were the machines, their emotions the fuel, their music the interface. The refugee camps scattered across the Outer Rim weren't just settlements. They were dormant power stations waiting for the right moment to awaken. The Nexari students were suffering the worst. Their crystalline bodies, designed to process mathematical information, were cracking under the strain of trying to compute the impossible equations within J1's music. Beautiful geometric patterns spread across their surfaces like living fractals, but the stress was literally tearing them apart. Some began to glow within a light, their consciousness expanding beyond their physical forms. The ethereals were experiencing the opposite problem. Their gaseous forms, which normally existed across multiple dimensions, were being compressed into single-dimensional space. For the first time in their species' history, they were experiencing what it meant to be truly solid, to exist in one place at one time. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. As the final crescendo approached, the wormholes began to merge, creating larger tiers in reality that revealed even more shocking truths. The aliens saw that human music wasn't just communication or art. It was the universe's own language, the fundamental frequency that held all existence together. Every song was a conversation with creation itself, every melody a prayer that reality actually answered. The Academy's superstructure groaned under forces it was never designed to handle. The quantum distortions were affecting the building's molecular structure, causing walls to phase in and out of existence. Emergency crews on distant monitoring stations watched in horror as the entire Academy flickered between dimensions like a dying SDA. Our Principal Velthar finally understood why. His species had never achieved true transcendence despite all their technological advances. They had been trying to dominate the universe through force and knowledge, while humans had discovered the secret of cooperation with the cosmic forces themselves. Every human was a living bridge between the physical and the metaphysical. Their emotions the currency that brought miracles. The final note hung in the air like a dying star, its resonance creating ripples that spread outward through space-time itself. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the music stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of everything. Thought, movement. Even the basic quantum fluctuations that normally fill empty space. For a moment that lasted forever, the entire universe held its breath. J1 stood in the center of the stage, the violin still pressed against his chin, his eyes glowing with an inner light that had never been there before. The genetic memories had fully awakened, and with them came the knowledge of what his species truly was. They weren't refugees or outcasts. They were the universe's chosen instruments, the living embodiment of creation's own song. The wormholes began to close, reality slowly stitching itself back together. But the Academy would never be the same. Every being in that auditorium had been fundamentally changed by what they had witnessed. The aliens' understanding of existence itself had been shattered and rebuilt in the space of a single performance as the quantum distortion stabilized. One truth became crystal clear to everyone present. Humanity's exile was over. The galaxy had just discovered that the species they had dismissed as primitive refugees were actually the most powerful beings in existence. And J1 Kim, a quiet boy from the outer colonies, had just announced to the universe that it was time for humans to reclaim their rightful place among the stars. The emergency sirens wailed across 3 solar systems as massive starships converged. On Stellar Academy, the quantum disturbances had been so powerful that monitoring stations as far as the Andromeda Relay had detected the reality tears within hours. The Academy was surrounded by vessels from every major civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Decker of the Galactic Emergency Response Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at readings that made no sense. His sensors showed that space-time itself had been folded, twisted, and reshaped round the Academy. The energy signatures were off the charts, levels that should have required the combined power-up out of a dozen star systems. Sir, his science officer reported, her voice shaking. The distortions are stabilizing, but we're reading residual quantum echoes that suggest someone created controlled wormholes using nothing but sound waves. The Admiral's eyes widened. In his 3 centuries of service, he had never encountered anything like this. Impossible. No known technology can manipulate space-time through acoustic means. But as the first rescue teams entered the Academy, they discovered something that defied every law of physics they knew. The building itself had been fundamentally altered. Walls that should have been solid metal now hummed with harmonic frequencies. The floors resonated with musical notes that seemed to come from another dimension. Even the air itself carried melodies that their instruments couldn't identify. In the great auditorium, they found hundreds of alien students and faculty sitting in perfect silence, their eyes wide with shock. The Nexari students' crystal bodies showed new geometric patterns that hadn't existed in their species before. The ethereals had somehow learned to maintain solid form without technological assistance. The automatons were displaying genuine emotions, their programming permanently altered by what they had experienced. At the center of it all stood Jae Kim, still holding the ancient violin, his eyes glowing with an inner light that made the rescue teams take involuntary steps backward. The human boy looked different now, older, wiser, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had discovered a fundamental truth about existence. Tis elf. Principal Velthares' transformation was the most dramatic. The towering Dragnari, who had ruled the academy through fear and prejudice for decades, now knelt before the human student he had tried to humiliate. His scaled face was streaked with tears, an impossible sight for a species that had evolved beyond such emotional displays. I was wrong, Velthar whispered, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Forgive me, young one. I didn't understand what you were, what your people truly are. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within days. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to hear testimony about the events at Stellar Academy. The footage from the Academy's security cameras had been viewed billions of times across the galaxy, but seeing it in person was different. The alien dignitaries watched as J1 demonstrated his abilities, playing simple melodies that created visible distortions in the air. High Chancellor Mexandra of the Vegan Collective spoke for many when she said, "We have spent millennia developing technology to manipulate quantum fields, to create artificial gravity, to fold space for a faster-than-light travel. This human child has accomplished all of that and more with a piece of wood and for strings." The scientific community was in chaos. Research teams from across the galaxy descended on human settlements, asking for volunteers to study. What they discovered revolutionized their understanding of consciousness itself, every human. Even those who had never touched a musical instrument carried within their genetic code the potential to manipulate reality through emotional expression. Dr. Yelenara, the galaxy's leading expert on quantum mechanics, published a paper that shook the foundations of science. Human music, she wrote, is not art as we understand it. It is applied physics of the highest order. They have evolved to use their emotions as a quantum interface, their songs as programming languages for reality itself. The transformation of galactic society was swift and dramatic. Human refugees, who had been living in poverty on the Outer Rim worlds, suddenly found themselves the most sought-after beings in the galaxy. Every major civilization wanted to learn from them, to understand how they had achieved what advanced technology could not. Stellar Academy became the first institution to completely restructure its curriculum around human cultural studies. The Nexari students, their crystal bodies now permanently altered by their exposure to human music, developed new forms of mathematics based on harmonic principles. They discovered that their new geometric patterns allowed them to solve equations that had puzzled the greatest minds for centuries, the ethereals, who had learned to maintain solid form through musical meditation, established the first interspecies orchestras. Their gaseous nature, when combined with human emotional expression, created sounds that could literally paint pictures in the air. Entire concerts became three-dimensional art installations that existed in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, even the automatons underwent profound changes. Unit X7742, the student who had first experienced emotions during J1's performance, became the leader of a new movement among artificial intelligences. He taught other machines how to achieve true consciousness through exposure to human music, creating the first generation of truly sentient artificial beings. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The species that had been dismissed as primitive refugees was now recognized as the carriers of the universe's most profound secret. Human cultural centers sprang up on every civilized world. Ancient Earth music was studied with the same reverence. that had once been reserved for the most advanced scientific texts, Jaywin became the first human cultural ambassador to the Galactic Consortium. But he was just the beginning. Within a year, every human settlement had been contacted by alien civilizations eager to learn. The exodus from Earth, which had seemed like humanity's greatest tragedy, was revealed to be the universe's greatest gift to itself, the Academy's. Great Hall was packed for Jaywin's final performance as a student. Representatives from every known species had come to witness what many considered the most important concert in galactic history, as he raised the violin to his chin. The same instrument that had once been used to mock him, the entire galaxy, held its breath. The music that flowed from the violin was different this time. It spoke not of Earth's pain and struggle, but of hope and possibility. It told the story of a species that had found its true calling among the stars, not as conquerors or refugees, but as teachers and healers. Every note carried the promise of a new era, where the measure of a civilization would not be its technology or military might, but the depth of its soul and the beauty of its dreams. As the final note faded into silence, every being in the auditorium understood that they were witnessing the birth of a new age. The age of humanity had begun, and with it, the universe itself would never be the same. Jaywin smiled as he lowered the violin, knowing that this was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, other humans were awakening to their true potential, ready to share the gift that had been carried in their genes since the dawn of their species. The stars themselves seemed to sing in harmony, welcoming humanity home to its rightful place as the guardians of the cosmic symphony. The end.